John had spent most of his life on the ranch. The wide open fields, the rolling hills, and the endless sky were his world. He knew every corner of his land, every fence, every grazing patch. To him, life on the ranch was simple and predictable. Every morning he would wake up at dawn, check on the cattle, repair the fences, and then spend the rest of the day tending to the land. It was a life he loved, a life of hard work and quiet satisfaction. One late summer morning, a moving truck rumbled down the dusty road leading to the edge of his property. John watched from the porch of his small wooden house. A woman was stepping out of the truck carrying a few boxes and what looked like a large wrapped bundle. She was tall, with dark hair that shone in the sunlight, and her eyes held a mixture of kindness and caution. She glanced around before taking her first step onto the land next to his ranch. Curiosity stirred in John. People didn't often come to these parts, especially not alone. He watched her carefully unpack her belongings, noticing that the bundle was always with her. She never set it down in the open, and whenever John happened to pass by the fence, she would quickly cover it again. He was puzzled but also intrigued. There was something about the way she moved, calm but alert, gentle but secretive, that made him want to know more. The next day, John decided to introduce himself. He walked over to the fence where she was tending to some small garden she had planted near her new house. "Morning," he called. "Name's John. Welcome to the neighborhood." The woman turned to him and smiled faintly. "Hello, I'm Clara," she replied. Her voice was soft but steady, and there was a strange warmth in her tone. John noticed her glancing at the bundle beside her. "Please, don't look under the cloth," she added quickly, almost as if she feared he might. John blinked, surprised by her sudden warning. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it," he said, trying to sound casual. But inside he felt a strange mix of curiosity and respect. She didn't seem to be hiding anything bad, but there was definitely a secret there. Days passed, and John found himself thinking about Clara and her mysterious bundle more often than he cared to admit. Sometimes, when he was repairing the fence or feeding the cattle, he would glance toward her property just to see what she was doing. She was always careful, always protective of the bundle. She would whisper to it sometimes, and occasionally, he thought he heard a soft, faint sound, almost like a tiny whimper. Despite her warnings, John's curiosity continued to grow. He was a man of habit, used to understanding everything in his world. And yet this mystery was unlike anything he had faced before. It wasn't a dangerous secret or something harmful. It was gentle, fragile, and alive, he could tell. There was a sense of life in the way she carried the bundle, a sense of love and care, but he didn't know what it was. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, John noticed Clara sitting on her porch. She held the bundle close to her chest, her eyes distant as if she were speaking to someone invisible. John paused in the shadows, not wanting to startle her. There was a softness in her demeanor that he hadn't seen in anyone else. She seemed to be protecting something very precious, something that mattered more than anything else in the world to her. John respected her distance, but his mind wouldn't let go of the mystery. He tried to focus on his work, but even while mending a fence or feeding the cows, his thoughts drifted to Clara and the cloth bundle. There was a feeling that if he could just see what was under that cloth, he would understand a small part of the life he had never known. Days turned into a week, and John realized that Clara's secret wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was something that touched his heart in a way he hadn't expected. He felt a strange connection, a desire to help even though he didn't know what was needed. He began leaving small gifts near her porch, fresh vegetables from his garden, a jar of honey from his bees, and once, a small handmade birdhouse. Clara would always smile politely, and sometimes she would nod in thanks, but the cloth remained untouched, carefully hidden, always present. One rainy afternoon, John saw her struggling to cover the bundle as the wind blew fiercely. He hurried over to help. "Here, let me help you," he said. Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Together they secured the bundle from the rain, and for a brief moment John's hand brushed hers. There was a warmth in that touch, a silent understanding that went beyond words, but she still didn't allow him to see beneath the cloth. As the days passed, John began to notice more than just her protective behavior. He noticed the kindness in her eyes when she looked at animals, the careful way she moved around the land, and the gentle way she spoke to the wind and the birds. There was a harmony in her presence, something that felt natural yet rare. He realized that whatever she was hiding, it was not dangerous, not selfish, but sacred, and that made him even more curious. By the end of the week, John found himself standing at the edge of his property one evening, watching Clara move around her yard. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the land. The cloth bundle seemed to glow softly in the fading light. He felt a mix of emotions, respect, curiosity, and a strange sense of anticipation. He knew the mystery would not stay hidden forever, that sooner or later he would have to see what lay beneath. Yet, as he watched Clara whispering softly to the bundle, he also felt a sense of hesitation. This was her secret, her life, and he had no right to interfere. But the pull of curiosity was strong. John realized that he was standing at the edge of something bigger than the ranch, bigger than the daily routine he had known all his life. Something delicate and fragile was waiting, and he could feel it calling out to him. The sun disappeared behind the hills, leaving a purple twilight over the fields. Clara moved inside, carrying the bundle carefully. John stayed behind, looking at the empty porch, feeling the quiet of the evening. The world was still, but inside him a storm of curiosity and wonder was growing. He didn't know what awaited him, but he knew one thing for certain. This was the beginning of something unusual, something that would change the rhythm of his simple ranch life forever. As he walked back to his house, John whispered to himself, "One day I will know, but not today." And with that, he returned to the comfort of his familiar routine, unaware that the mystery of the cloth was about to reveal something that would shake his world in ways he had never imagined. The days grew longer and warmer, as summer edged closer to autumn. John continued his usual work on the ranch, but lately, his thoughts kept drifting toward Clara and her mysterious cloth bundle. He had tried to focus on feeding the cattle, repairing fences and clearing the weeds, but every time he passed her yard, his eyes would wander to the bundle she always kept carefully hidden. One morning, as John repaired the fence near the edge of her property, he noticed Clara moving quickly toward her small shed. She carried the bundle tightly pressed to her chest, glancing over her shoulder as though she expected someone or something to be watching. John felt a pang of worry. It was unusual for her to rush like that, and he wondered if something had frightened her. Later that afternoon, he saw her standing by the old oak tree near the creek, gently placing the bundle on the ground. She knelt beside it and whispered softly. John could not hear what she was saying, but he could see her lips moving in the tender way she touched the cloth. Her careful movements, the way she seemed protective yet anxious, stirred something in John, a mix of respect and curiosity. He felt an almost irresistible pull to know what was under that cloth. The next day, John's curiosity reached its peak. He found himself pacing near the edge of Clara's property, pretending to check on the fence, but in truth he was watching her. She moved with the same care as before, but there was a subtle tension in her shoulders that John hadn't noticed earlier. She seemed alert, almost nervous, as if she feared something might happen if the bundle were left unprotected. John wanted to ask her about it, but every time he tried, he hesitated. She had warned him, "Don't look under the cloth," and he respected her enough to know that some secrets were private. Still, the questions in his mind would not go away. Why was she so protective? What could be so delicate, so important, that she needed to hide it at all times? One afternoon, a sudden gust of wind blew across the ranch, rustling the trees and shaking the cloth bundle. Clara ran toward it, her hands trembling slightly as she secured it against the wind. John rushed over to help. "Here, let me help you," he called. She hesitated but nodded. Together they held the bundle firmly against the gusts of wind. Their hands brushed briefly, and John felt a strange warmth spread through him. "You're very careful with it," he said softly, trying not to sound too curious. Clara nodded, her eyes fixed on the bundle. "It's fragile," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "It can't be left alone." John nodded, understanding that whatever was under the cloth was precious to her, but his curiosity continued to grow. That evening, as he walked back to his house, he could not stop thinking about the bundle. He wondered what kind of life it held, what made it so fragile, and why Clara was willing to keep it hidden from the world. The following week, John decided to leave a small gift near her porch, a basket of fresh vegetables from his garden. He placed it carefully, hoping she would notice without thinking he was prying. Later that evening, he saw Clara smile softly as she picked up the basket. She looked at the bundle and then back at him, a faint nod of thanks on her face. That simple acknowledgement made John feel a connection with her, as though he were sharing a small part of her world without seeing the secret she protected. One evening, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with orange and purple hues. John was finishing his chores when he noticed Clara struggling again with the bundle. A sudden movement in the grass caught his eye. A family of deer had wandered near her yard. Startled by their presence, Clara stumbled slightly and the bundle slipped toward the ground. John ran quickly and caught it just in time. "You're lucky I was nearby," he said, handing it back to her. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline of the moment. Clara looked at him with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, John," she said softly. "It means a lot that you care." Her words struck something deep in him. He realized that the bundle wasn't just an object. It was something alive, something that needed protection. And the responsibility Clara carried was enormous. She was not hiding it out of fear or selfishness, but out of love and care. That understanding made John's curiosity even more intense. But now it was accompanied by respect and a growing sense of empathy. The next day, John found himself wandering near the creek, pretending to check on the irrigation system. He saw Clara there, kneeling beside the bundle, humming softly. The faint sound of a tiny whimper reached his ears. His heart skipped a beat. There was definitely something alive under that cloth, and it needed care. John sat on a nearby rock, pretending to look at the water, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. Clara looked tired but determined. She adjusted the cloth carefully, making sure it was safe and secure. Her focus was complete, her attention unwavering. John admired her dedication. She was protecting something far beyond what he could have imagined. Days turned into nights, and John's curiosity became almost unbearable. He wanted to help, to know what he could do to ease Clara's burden, but he also feared crossing the line. He remembered her warning clearly. "Don't look under the cloth." The words echoed in his mind, reminding him that some mysteries were sacred. One rainy evening, John noticed Clara struggling again. The heavy rain soaked her clothes, and the wind threatened to lift the cloth. Without thinking, he ran to her side. "Let me help you," he shouted over the storm. Together, they secured the bundle under the small shelter near her porch. For the first time, John saw the exhaustion on Clara's face, the sleepless nights, the constant worry, and the love she poured into protecting this secret. "You really care, don't you?" John said gently, noticing how delicate her movements were. Clara looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's not just mine," she said. "It needs care. Someone must protect it." John felt a mixture of awe and curiosity. He realized that whatever was under the cloth was more than just fragile. It was precious, innocent, and in need of protection. His desire to know grew, but now it was accompanied by a promise in his heart. He would help her. Not out of curiosity alone, but out of respect for the life she was guarding. That night, John lay in his bed, listening to the wind against the roof of his house. He could not stop thinking about Clara and the bundle. The mystery remained, and the suspense weighed heavily on him. He knew that at some point he would have to face the truth of what lay beneath the cloth, but he also knew that the moment must be right, that it must come with care and understanding, not recklessness. For the first time in his life, John understood that some mysteries were not meant to be solved immediately. Some secrets required patience, empathy, and courage, and as he drifted off to sleep, he made a silent promise. One day he would help Clara, no matter what the secret was. And when that day came, he hoped his hands would be steady, not trembling with fear, but strong enough to protect alongside her. Days had passed, and the mystery of the cloth had grown heavier in John's mind. Every morning he awoke thinking of Clara and her secret. Every evening he returned from the ranch chores, hoping to catch even a glimpse of what lay hidden beneath the cloth. Yet, despite the constant curiosity, he never crossed the line. Clara's repeated warning echoed in his mind. "Don't look under the cloth." He respected it, but the pull was undeniable. One warm afternoon, John was fixing a broken water trough near the creek when he noticed something unusual. Clara was pacing nervously near the shed, glancing around as if expecting someone. She clutched the cloth bundle tightly and muttered softly under her breath. John paused, pretending to adjust the trough, but his eyes remained on her. She seemed anxious, more than he had ever seen before. Suddenly, The sound of a distant vehicle approached along the dirt road. It was a delivery truck, rare in these parts. Clara's eyes widened with concern. She hurried toward her porch, shielding the bundle from view. John felt a sudden surge of tension. Whoever was coming, Clara clearly didn't want them to see the bundle. His curiosity deepened, but he remained hidden behind the fence, watching quietly. The truck stopped near the entrance of her property, and a man stepped out. He wore a uniform and carried a clipboard. Clara greeted him cautiously, her body positioned protectively in front of the bundle. John could see her lips moving in careful, polite words, and the man seemed to nod in understanding. Whatever they were discussing, it appeared serious, and Clara's nervous gestures made John wonder if the bundle might be in danger. After the man left, John noticed Clara slumping slightly. She seemed relieved but also tense. She carried the bundle to the small oak tree near the creek, speaking softly to it as she always did. Her hands shook slightly, not with fear but with exhaustion and worry. John felt a deep pang of empathy. Whatever was under that cloth, it was not just precious, it was vulnerable, delicate, and in need of constant care. That evening, John stayed late on the porch of his own house, pretending to read a book while actually watching Clara move carefully with the bundle. The sky turned a deep shade of violet and the first stars began to appear. Clara settled near the oak tree, placing the bundle on a soft blanket. She knelt beside it, her hands moving tenderly over the cloth, as though soothing something alive beneath. John's curiosity became almost unbearable. He wanted to see, to know, but he also realized that the moment must be approached with care. He couldn't rush it. The way Clara protected the bundle made it clear that whatever was under that cloth was not only alive but fragile enough to be harmed by careless actions. He decided to wait, to find a moment when he could help without overstepping boundaries. The following morning, a storm rolled in. Dark clouds covered the sky, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. John was in the barn feeding the cattle when he noticed Clara struggling to secure the bundle under her small porch roof. The wind blew fiercely, threatening to lift the cloth. Without thinking, John ran across the yard. "Clara, let me help," he shouted over the wind. She looked up, startled, but quickly nodded. Together they held the bundle against the rain and wind. Their hands met briefly, and John felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the storm. It was the shared responsibility, the unspoken connection between two people who understood that the fragile life beneath that cloth mattered more than anything else. After the storm passed, Clara invited John to sit with her for a moment. He hesitated, but accepted. They sat in silence, the only sound the soft dripping of rain from the leaves. Clara finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "You've been watching," she said. John nodded, unsure how to respond. "I respect your curiosity," she continued. "But you must understand what's under this cloth. It can't be exposed to everyone. It's fragile and it needs care." John looked at her seriously. "I understand," he said. "I don't want to harm it. I only want to help if I can." Clara studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There was a quiet trust forming between them. John realized that the secret she carried was not just hers. It was something she wanted to protect, and she was beginning to see him as someone who could share that responsibility. That night, John could hardly sleep. His mind was filled with images of Clara kneeling beside the bundle, her hands gentle and careful, her voice soft. He imagined what could be hidden beneath the cloth. Perhaps it was an injured animal she had rescued, he thought, or maybe something even smaller, more delicate. Whatever it was, he knew it required protection, and he wanted to be part of that protection. The next morning, John went out earlier than usual. He found Clara already outside, carefully tending to the bundle as she always did. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the ranch. He noticed the faint sound of a soft whimper coming from beneath the cloth. His heart skipped a beat. This was not just a mystery anymore, it was life. A fragile life that depended entirely on Clara's care. Without thinking, he stepped closer. "Clara," he said gently, "let me help you today, please. I promise I won't do anything to hurt it." Clara looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. For a long moment she remained silent, studying him. Finally she sighed and nodded. "All right," she said, "but you must be very careful. It's extremely fragile. One wrong move and—" She trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. The weight of her words sank into John's mind. He nodded solemnly. "I understand," he said. Together they carefully lifted the cloth. John's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the anticipation of seeing the life that Clara had protected so carefully. Beneath the cloth lay a tiny fawn no more than a few days old. Its small legs trembled and its wide eyes looked up at them. Clara's gentle hands stroked its fur, and John felt an overwhelming sense of awe. It was a fragile, living being entirely dependent on their care. John realized the responsibility that came with curiosity. This was not just a secret anymore. It was a life that needed protection, compassion, and patience. Clara looked at him and smiled faintly. "Now you see," she said softly. "This is why I told you not to look. It's not dangerous, but it is precious, and it needs care more than anything else." John felt a deep respect for her, and for the life beneath the cloth. He understood that his curiosity had led him to a turning point, a moment where he could choose to help instead of merely observe. And in that moment he made a silent promise. He would protect this tiny life alongside Clara, and he would do everything he could to ensure it survived and thrived. For the first time, John's hands were steady. No longer trembling with anticipation or curiosity, they were calm and determined, ready to help nurture the fragile life that had unexpectedly entered their world. And in that moment he realized that some mysteries are not meant to be uncovered for the sake of curiosity. They are meant to teach patience, compassion, and the quiet strength of care. From the moment John saw the tiny fawn beneath the cloth, his world changed. It was no longer just the ranch, the routine, or the quiet days of work. This small life had become the center of his attention. Every morning he woke up thinking of the fawn, wondering if it had eaten enough, if it was warm, and if Clara needed help keeping it safe. For the first time in years, John felt a sense of purpose beyond his usual chores. Clara had begun to trust him fully. She showed him how to feed the fawn with a tiny bottle, how to keep it warm under soft blankets, and how to make sure it rested in a quiet corner of her porch. John was careful with every move, his hands steady and gentle, following Clara's guidance. Every day he learned more about patience, care, and the quiet satisfaction of nurturing something fragile. One afternoon, a storm approached the ranch. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and the wind whipped across the fields with an unusual force. Clara rushed to secure the fawn's small corner, wrapping blankets tightly and moving it under a sturdier part of the porch. John hurried to help, his heart pounding.
"We have to make sure it doesn't get wet,"
he shouted over the wind. Together they worked quickly, their hands moving in perfect coordination. For the first time, John realized how strong a bond could be when two people worked to protect something greater than themselves. Clara's hands were quick and gentle, and John's were steady and firm. The storm raged around them, but under the porch the fawn was safe, its tiny breaths calm and even. After the storm passed, the ranch was quiet again. The fawn looked up at them with wide, trusting eyes, and John felt an overwhelming sense of relief. He looked at Clara, who smiled faintly, exhausted but content. "You see," she said softly, "this is why I told you not to look before. It's fragile, and it needs protection more than curiosity." John nodded. "I understand now," he said. "It's not just a secret. It's a life, and I promise I'll help protect it." Days turned into weeks. John and Clara became a team. He would bring food, check the blankets, and help her monitor the fawn's health. She would guide him patiently, teaching him the smallest details: the right temperature of water, the gentle way to stroke the tiny legs, and how to comfort it when it shivered. Slowly, the fawn grew stronger, its legs steadier, its eyes brighter, and its trust in them deepened. One morning, John noticed something extraordinary. The fawn tried to stand on its own. Its legs wobbled, but with a little encouragement from Clara and John, it managed to take a few steps. John's heart swelled with pride. He had never felt so connected to another life. Clara laughed softly, her voice full of relief and happiness. "Look at it," she said. "It's learning to walk. It's ready for the world outside soon." The following days were filled with small victories. The fawn learned to eat solid food, play lightly in the yard, and recognize John and Clara as its protectors. Every evening, John would sit quietly nearby, watching the fawn move around, marveling at how something so small could fill the heart with such joy and responsibility. Clara would sit beside him, and sometimes they didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. The bond they had formed with the fawn and with each other was stronger than any conversation could express. But one day, a challenge came. The fawn, now more confident and curious, wandered too close to the edge of the property. A sudden noise, perhaps a wild animal or a falling branch, startled it. The fawn bolted, its small legs carrying it dangerously close to the creek. John's heart leapt. Without thinking, he ran after it, calling its name. Clara followed closely, shouting words of encouragement. Time seemed to slow as John reached the creek. The fawn teetered on the slippery edge, its tiny hooves struggling to find footing. John stretched out his hands carefully, trying to catch it without scaring it further. The wind whistled around him, the water rushing below, but he focused only on the fawn. With a careful move, he scooped it up into his arms, holding it firmly but gently. Clara arrived a moment later, relief washing over her face. "You did it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. John handed the fawn to her and she hugged it close, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's alive because of both of us." That day, John realized the full weight of responsibility. The fawn wasn't just fragile, it was alive, aware, and trusting. Every decision they made could affect its life. And yet, through patience, care, and teamwork, they had protected it from harm. The challenge had tested their skills, their courage, and their ability to work together. In the following weeks, John and Clara prepared for the day the fawn could return to the wild. It had grown strong, healthy, and confident. Its trust in humans remained, but it needed freedom to thrive fully. John felt a mixture of sadness and pride. He had grown attached to the tiny life, yet he knew that letting it go was the right choice. On a bright morning, they carried the fawn to the far end of the ranch, where the forest began. The trees swayed gently in the wind, sunlight filtering through the leaves. The fawn looked around, sniffing the air, then glanced back at John and Clara. It seemed to understand that this was the moment it had been waiting for. Clara knelt down and whispered softly to it, "You are ready now. Be safe and remember we care for you." John watched, his heart full of emotion. With a gentle push, the fawn stepped forward into the forest. It paused, looking back one last time before disappearing among the trees. John and Clara stood together in silence. The bond they had formed through weeks of care and protection was stronger than any words could describe. The fawn was free, alive, and thriving because of their patience, courage, and love. Finally, Clara turned to John, a faint smile on her face. "Thank you for helping," she said. "I couldn't have done it alone." John smiled back, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. "We did it together," he said. "And I've learned something important. Some mysteries aren't just for curiosity. They are for care, patience, and understanding." As they walked back to the ranch, the wind rustling through the trees, John felt a quiet pride. The storm had passed, the fawn was safe, and a new chapter had begun, not just for the tiny life they had nurtured, but for John and Clara as well. They had faced a challenge, overcome it, and learned the true meaning of protection, trust, and the gentle power of care. After the fawn returned to the forest, John and Clara walked back to the ranch in a quiet, peaceful silence. The sun was low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the fields. The air smelled fresh, a mixture of wet earth from the recent storm and the clean scent of the forest. It was as if the world itself was acknowledging the life they had nurtured and released. John thought about the past few weeks, about the stormy nights, the moments of worry, and the tiny successes that had seemed so small at the time but had meant everything. He realized that the experience had changed him. The ranch was still the same fences, same rolling hills, same routine chores. But John himself was different. He had learned something profound. Life, no matter how small, deserved care, patience, and respect. Clara walked beside him, carrying the empty blanket they had used for the fawn. Her face reflected a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet happiness. She finally relaxed, no longer tense from the constant worry of protecting the fragile life. She had trusted John, and together they had succeeded. That trust had created a bond between them, one that neither of them had expected when he first watched her from afar. Curious about her secret. As they reached the porch of her small house, John stopped and looked at Clara. "You know," he said softly, "I never imagined something like this would happen. I thought life on the ranch was all about routine, but this has shown me something else entirely." Clara nodded, smiling faintly. "It's easy to forget how important small lives are," she said. "Sometimes the quietest beings teach us the strongest lessons." Her eyes met his, and in that simple glance, John felt a depth of understanding. They had both learned patience, empathy, and the quiet courage required to protect something fragile. For the next few days, life on the ranch slowly returned to normal. The cattle grazed peacefully, the wind rustled the trees, and the chores continued. Yet even in the midst of normality, John felt a subtle difference. He moved with a gentler awareness, noticing the smallest details. The way a bird perched on a fence, the tiny shoots of grass breaking through the soil, and the soft rustle of leaves signaling a small animal nearby. He had learned to appreciate life in its smallest forms. Clara continued her daily routines, but there was a calmness in her movements now, a sense of quiet satisfaction. She no longer had to carry the constant weight of worry for the fawn, but she remained vigilant, her care and attentiveness a permanent part of who she was. John observed her often, admiring not just her strength but her gentle patience, and he realized that the lessons she taught the fawn had also been lessons for him. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, John and Clara sat together on her porch drinking warm tea. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken words and shared experiences. Finally, John spoke. "I never thought I'd be part of something like this," he said. "It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about caring, protecting, and understanding, and I've learned more than I could have imagined." Clara nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "And you've shown that you can be trusted," she said. "It's not just about helping. It's about knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to protect without interfering. You've grown through this, John, I see it." John smiled, feeling a warmth he had never felt before. It was more than satisfaction. It was a sense of fulfillment, of having been part of something meaningful. The fawn had been fragile, dependent, and uncertain, but it had thrived because they had worked together. And in nurturing that small life, John realized he had nurtured something inside himself as well, a deeper understanding of responsibility, compassion, and quiet strength. Days passed, and the fawn remained free in the forest, occasionally glimpsed from the ranch as it moved gracefully among the trees. John and Clara would sometimes watch from a distance, smiling as the tiny creature explored its world. The bond they had created with the fawn continued to influence their lives, reminding them that care, patience, and empathy were powerful forces, capable of shaping not only small lives but their own. John began to apply these lessons to every part of his life. He treated the land with greater care, noticing when a tree needed support or when a patch of soil required nurturing. He interacted with animals more gently, understanding that each one had its own fragility and its own needs. And with Clara, he shared a quiet partnership, built on mutual respect and the memory of what they had accomplished together. One afternoon, as John worked in the field, Clara approached him, carrying a small notebook. "I've been keeping notes," she said softly, "about the fawn, its progress, and the things we did. Maybe someday this could help others who want to protect small, fragile lives." John took the notebook, flipping through the pages. Each entry was detailed, careful, filled with observations, lessons, and reflections. He realized that the story of the fawn was not just theirs. It was a story that could inspire others, teaching them the value of patience, care, and empathy. "This is wonderful," he said. "It shows that life, no matter how small, is precious, and we have a responsibility to protect it when we can." Clara smiled, her eyes warm. "And it's not just about protection," she added. "It's about understanding. Every life teaches us something if we are willing to listen." John nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The experience had changed him in ways he could never have predicted. He had started as a curious rancher, intrigued by a mysterious cloth, and had grown into someone who understood the profound responsibility of care. He had learned that curiosity was not enough. True understanding required patience, empathy, and action when it mattered most. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the ranch, John and Clara stood together, looking out at the fields and the distant forest. The fawn was gone, free to explore its world, but the lessons it had left behind remained. John felt a deep sense of gratitude for Clara, for the tiny life they had protected, and for the quiet strength that had grown inside him. He realized that life was fragile, beautiful, and interconnected. Each small act of care, each patient moment could make a difference. And as he walked back to his house that evening, he felt a sense of peace he had never known. His hands no longer trembled, not from curiosity, not from fear, but from the quiet, steady strength that comes from understanding, empathy, and love. The ranch returned to its rhythm, the cattle grazing, the wind rustling the trees, and the sun rising and setting over the hills. Yet for John and Clara, everything had changed. The fawn had taught them lessons that would remain forever, that life is precious, that trust and care are powerful, and that even the smallest lives can leave the biggest impact on the hearts of those who protect them. And as John stood on the porch one evening, watching the stars appear in the clear night sky, he smiled. The world was full of mysteries, yes, but now he knew the most important one, the quiet, gentle power of care. It was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life.